Hello everyone, and I just want to say that I'm honoured to be able to present some of my work here in front of the people that have made this kind of work possible for your constant kind of development and work that you do on Csound. So thanks very much for that. So I'm going to talk about Csound as a tool for enabling musicians. This is a little aside from my main research. I'm a composer of electroacoustic music, and I'm very interested in using physical input, particularly more and more the human body as an input into musical systems such as Csound. And kind of along that way, I kind of got a bit sidetracked with a couple of projects, but they were kind of good. They were good sidetracks. So that's what I'm going to talk about now. So I guess I'll start at the start of the narrative. So yeah. So kind of this kind of journey kind of started when I did an interactive audio installation with a friend of mine, Simon Kenny, who was a graduate of Maynooth University here as well. And initially, this is an installation that took in the ambience of a room into a mic which was placed inside this ear here, and then that could then be spectrally manipulated using PVS opcodes by manipulating the lead motion sensor, which is sitting on top of this eye here. And you could also spatialize. You could throw the sound around the room. So it was in quadraphonic setup. So you'd speak into the ear, you kind of manipulate the leap over the eye, and then the sound would come out of the mouths. And Simon was asked, after we developed this, Simon was asked to could we use it in conjunction with the Galway Autism project. And we thought, yeah, we'll give it a shot anyway. And so we took it into the Galway Autism project. They kind of deal with kids from about, I guess, 8 to 14, something like that. And so we went in and played it for them. And if you ever want an honest opinion, that's the place to go, because we were told that what's the quote? It sounds like clawing on the inside of my ears. So we're like, okay, we'll change the sound a little bit. So we messed around with the sound. We got a bit of feedback as to what they'd like to hear. They wanted to hear things like the electric piano, nice smooth bass, things like that. So what we did was we took the audio input and tracked the pitch information, the amplitude information, and turned it into little electric piano notes, something like that anyway. And then the leap then was used to accompany it like kind of a bass instrument, and the pitch information then was also taken from the audio input. So what this allowed people to do was a couple of people in the group that didn't like touching things that they didn't know, that they didn't know intimately, or something that they didn't see every day. So this was a way of them to play an instrument without actually touching it. So it got loads of laughs, and it got a lot of people involved that would otherwise just have stepped away from something like that. So it opened my eyes as to, I guess, the so what of my research, which I don't know if anyone has ever encountered this. If you're doing a research PhD or master or anything like that, you're like, okay, so I'm making weird sounds and it's cool, but like, so what? So this genuinely seemed to be having a positive impact on someone else apart from myself in my room listening to weird sounds. So with that in mind, then I got involved with this project up in Queen's University, and it was curated by Dr. Francisca Schroeder and Dr. Koichi Samuels. So Big Ears was a workshop for 3 days last year, and we got to meet different musicians with different disabilities, physical disabilities and intellectual disabilities, and groups of 3 designers, composers, whatever, were paired off with one musician, and the musician then got to say, I would like an instrument that does this, because any instrument at the moment doesn't satisfy my needs. So we learned a lot about the design process, I guess, that you can't assume anything ever. If we'd have been left off by ourselves to design something, we would have come back and given someone an instrument that they weren't particularly, that they weren't particularly happy with. So this was a really good opportunity to kind of learn how to listen to what's needed, I guess. So the first day we met with the musician, we had a bit of a brainstorm as to what we could do. the next 2 days then we built this instrument, and then on the third day in SART, in the Sonic Arts Research Centre in Belfast, it was performed as part of an ensemble improvisation. So the instrument that we built, it was called Peep the Bee, because of the colours, that was named by the musician that it was made for. So the musician that we made this for, she liked playing piano and keyboards, but she found it very hard to move chord voicings in time with the music, to coordinate all her fingers at the same time was difficult for her. So this is essentially like a one-touch polyphonic keyboard, and these are just simple touch sensors set up here. It's all guts out because that's kind of when the people that were kind of funding this wanted to have a look. They wanted to see, oh yeah, this, and they wanted to see all the guts out. So that's why it kind of looks like this. The colour also actually. This is one thing that kind of resounded throughout talking to all the musicians was, you might have a musician who's like 12, say for example, and just because she might have a physical disability, it doesn't mean that she's a child. So a lot of these kind of things you might find in you know, the special needs area, they're kind of coloured like kindergarten kind of colours, like the Scoob cube and stuff like that. So that was a consideration. It was just, yeah, let's not patronise here. So we made this. Worked really well, especially with the time that was allotted. So these are the 4 touch sensors. Then you can trigger different voicings of an instrument, and then the demonstrator there, their left hand is over an infrared sensor that helps the player to articulate the amplitude envelope and things like the reverb time. There was a couple of problems with this, however. It wasn't. It requires knowledge of Max Live and Arduino. The project was sponsored by Ableton, so we had to work within Live, which is kind of, it's a bit alien to me. So it was a 3-day crash course on Max for me. But so it requires the knowledge of Max Live and Arduino. It required a laptop to run. Live is not particularly portable, so we couldn't really put it on a Raspberry Pi and let it kind of do its own thing. So what that meant was, after the musician had played this at the concert, that was it. You know, they're not going to be playing that ever again because their carer won't know how to set up the Arduino circuit. They won't know how to set up the Max patch. They won't know how to set up Live, things like that. Also, I found that the treatment of data wasn't as intuitive as desired. But that's my own thing. I wasn't used to using Max. I've used PD and stuff a while, but I find like the order of precedence and stuff kind of confused me a little bit. So I couldn't really contort the instrument into the exact way I wanted it. So with these in mind, then I started to try and kind of maybe develop a few other alternative approaches. So after that, I was asked to assist in there's a school in South Dublin, and their music therapy teacher asked me to could I come in and help with some of their music sessions. And at the time, their music sessions consisted of the students coming into a room, and then a guy sitting in the corner playing his guitar, and they just listened passively, and that was it. Like, you know, so they kind of wanted to step away from that and get the students kind of creating a little bit more. So so this is where I come back to Csound. The other one I know it's Live and Max, but it's part of the narrative, so stick with me. So this is when I came back to Csound. So I made this game. So it uses these big Mac buttons that they have in a lot of special needs schools. Just a big button, that's all it is, and you can map them to different keyboard ASCII characters. And the idea of this game was I had a processing sketch running in conjunction with Csound, and you'd see, for example, the colour red would come up on the screen, and that means that the red button is now active in this instance. So each button had an instrument mapped to it. So the red was kind of like a pad kind of sound. The green was kind of like twinkly small tubular bells, things like that. And so the idea was, if red comes on and the pad instrument isn't on already, if you press red, the pad instrument will be engaged. If the pad instrument already is engaged and red comes on, you press the red button, it turns off. And that was basically it. I didn't really know why I did it like that, but it turned out to actually, the music therapist did some work on it, and it turned out to improve things like hand-eye coordination and memory. So we have this musician here who's beside me. After 2 or 3 sessions, he stopped following the sequence. He'd be like, "Oh no, I like red. I'm not going to turn it off now," and things like that. So they were actually learning to play this instrument. Now, granted, they were playing within a set of rules that I had made. Like it was essentially a generative compositional instrument, but they were making these decisions themselves, and they were actually genuinely creating something that was their own. So I have an example of a piece. I have an example just of one of the pieces that this particular guy made. So let's see. I never know how many times to press this. Yeah, I think that's it there. Issue that in order for it to be used, I had to be there. I had to run the processing sketch. I had to run the Csound, the Csound program. I had to have a laptop there that could run all this. It just kind of defeated the purpose a little bit for me, because due to other time and other commitments, basically I couldn't go there every week anymore. So so like I started thinking there has to be a better way of doing this. So. At this point, we come to these design considerations. So the interface of the instrument that I was to design in the future would be to appeal to the specific requirements of the user, to be robust, so it can't not work ever. If someone goes to press something and that button just fails, there's a problem in the code, there's a bug in the code, that's just a no-no. It has to just be robust and work no matter what. Be capable of musical expression. So you're not just kind of like, again, just pressing buttons and it's the make sound go now button, and it just does everything for you. There has to be the ability to put some sort of human input into it as well. It should require no specialist knowledge to operate. So just out of the box, just plug it in, should just go, whatever it is. It should be adaptable, which is the nice thing about Csound. You can just open up the source code again and just change it to whatever, if they don't like, say, the harmonic content or the voice of the instrument. Be affordable and be portable as well. So the portability thing was where the last couple of examples had failed. So the portability was solved when I started working with the Galileo. So Professor Lazzarini did quite a bit of work on making a specific version of Csound that worked on the Intel Galileo. So if anyone's unfamiliar with it, the Intel Galileo is essentially an Arduino with a brain, to put it crudely. So here we have, it's almost exactly the same layout as an Arduino Uno, but over here we have an SD slot that can take a pared-back version of Linux, so it can run an operating system. On the operating system, you can run Csound, and then from within Csound we can access these GPIO pins directly within Csound. There's much more detail in this on another paper that myself, Professor Lazzarini, and Dr. Joe Timoney, I think it was 2 years ago that we did for the Linux Audio Conference. But the kind of the idea of accessing the pin, where if you were to access analog input, you just use a simple chan get opcode, and if I was accessing analog 0, I'd type in analog 0, analog 1, I'd type in analog 1, and so forth. And digital inputs, there's a bit of multiplexing going on, but I'm not going to go into that at the moment, but It was just using these new opcodes, this GPIN. So that's just to get input from your digital pins, and then GP out will give you output, so to turn on LEDs or servo motors or whatever like that. So with that as a tool, then I was asked to go back to do this year's Big Ears workshop. It was a bit of a different format this year. We had a meeting for 2 days up in Belfast, and then I was allowed work for a couple of months on this project. And the guy I was working with, he has cerebral palsy, and so he's in a wheelchair. The main way that he's able to physically interact with full control with things, so at the moment, is with a grid system with the aid of his assistant, or he can use the joystick on his wheelchair. So I decided to maybe take advantage of something that he already knows, and he was kind of only learning it as I was speaking with him, learning to use the joystick properly. So I said, well, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, I could make this as a kind of a learning tool for him to practice on his joystick. So I decided to make this. Oh, hang on a second before I show you that. Oh, yeah. So this is the prototype joystick that I made, and essentially what it is, it's a four oscillator synth with pitch randomization. The user has control over multiple parameters with a minimal interface. So the complete interface is just this joystick. The x-axis controls cut-off frequency of a Moog VCF2 filter. Y-axis controls the resonance of the filter. And then the force exerted on the joystick controls instrument trigger and index of modulation. So what's going on here is, the reason I 3D printed this joystick shaft here, and then I wrapped a layer of copper tape around that, and then around that I wrapped a layer of Velostat, which is conductive material, and then I wrapped another layer of copper tape, which essentially makes an FSR, a force-sensitive resistor. So when the joystick was touched, it triggered the instrument to turn on, and then as it squeezed, the index of modulation and the frequency modulation parameter is increased. Now, unfortunately, when I brought this up to the musician, it wasn't robust. When the musician went to squeeze, just as a part of his condition, he had this co-articulation where he would, when he squeezed the joystick, he'd pull his hand up to his chest. So I Tech 7'd this shaft to the module. So I thought it was pretty bulletproof, but it wasn't. Like, it just came off, and that straight away was like, that's just like, again, it's not robust. It can't work. So I went back to the drawing board and I found an actual a joystick online that would be used. That was almost replica of the one that he uses for his wheelchair. So I replaced it, and I came out. I replaced it, and I don't know if you can see that there, but this is it in its box. It's kind of, I just have the power lead that I have with me today is actually quite short. I'm just going to turn on these speakers, and hopefully one of them I'm plugged into will turn on, and I can play you a little bit of the instrument. Fingers crossed.
Is this with the Galileo as well in there?
There's a Galileo in there as well. Yeah. So it just it runs from this. It runs a Csound file from boot. And that's it. All you got to do is just so I have a little USB audio card here. Okay. So obviously you need some. The reason I put the lights on was once you plug it in, the Galileo hasn't fully booted. So you know when the green light's on, it's good to go. When the red light is engaged, then the instrument is on. Squeeze that part there. Then I'll let that go. Initially I did things like I had the y-axis being being the controller of the pitch. It's tonal because it's going to be using an ensemble, so that's why I'm using a specific scale. But you ended up getting this, I don't know, it's kind of cliched, this kind of almost theremin-y kind of sound going up and down in pitch, so I didn't like that. And then what I used was then I had the pitch as an irate variable, so it would look to see where the joystick was before you touched it. So if I had it all the way down, it would start off with a bass note. But then, unfortunately, I just discovered that the musician didn't have that kind of level of control. So to avoid frustration, then it's essentially doing mostly a random pitch walk along the scale. So that's how the pitches are, just for this ensemble. But this is the beauty of it. I can just pop 2 screws, put an Ethernet cable in there, and somewhere down the line when the musician has more control over it, I can just make that parameter then controllable by the musician by changing one line of code, So, and this is also the beauty of it. After this ensemble, which is tomorrow, in fact, if anyone's in Belfast tomorrow, you can just take this home with him and then practice it and play it and learn a bit about it. If he gets bored with it, I can get in contact with him. I can add stuff to it constantly. So. Stranger Things was on when I was designing this sound, so that's kind of that faux John Carpenter sound. So actually I could totally space out and play that for a while, so I'm not going to. But that's pretty much it. So again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my work with you. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
It's great sound that you have that box. What are these basic just?
There's 4 oscillators. There are two sine waves, a sawtooth, and a square wave. They're pitched harmonically. I can't remember exactly the spacing of the pitch. They're harmonically spaced anyway, and then it's just simple F. The 4 of those are summed and then modulated using simple FM at the end of it.
Oh, so there's no filters
then? No, the only filter is that Moog filter. So
yeah,
that's basically it. Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, and where are you doing the synthesis?
The synthesis in Csound?
No, yeah, but
yeah.
Is it in the box or is it outside the box?
No, everything's in the box.
Okay.
So all you need to do is just plug it in and that's it.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do. So
it's nice sound because that's the main thing about this sort of interactive things that they use for enhancing sort of people's. Often there's like tinkly sounds and not. This is actually
Well, that was from feedback from the musician. So luckily I got it together enough in time that I was still up in Belfast and I could say, what do you think of this sound? And he was into it. And then I developed it a little bit more, but I kept the sound.
Yeah.
The sound
that's like, sounds like a real thing.
Cool.
Just 2 questions, one for you, one that perhaps Victor might answer as well. Just on the GP in opcodes, will they work on the Raspberry Pi as well? Or
no, I don't think so.
Just for the Galileo.
Yeah, but you can, I guess you can hack it.
And that was the next question then. Why did you choose the Intel Galileo over something more common like a Pi? Or
Well, it was essentially because I had been using it before on different projects. I'd made a couple of different hardware controllers just to help me in compositions and stuff like that. And and that's just after Victor had done the work and asked me to kind of implement it. It was just rather than trying to learn something else, and also the fact of accessing the GPIOs on a Raspberry Pi. It's just not one like in that it's just one line of code. So I'm not a programmer at all. So if I can avoid programming in any shape or form, I will do so. And this kind of helped me just work in the Csound environment. I didn't have to worry about too much. Like I say, there's a little bit of multiplexing, but that's just like looking at a chart and then putting in the correlating numbers. So it was just easy for me.
Wait, are you doing like the multiplex on the Csound side?
Yeah. So you just look at the chart, see what the digital pin number is,
and then map it to
and then you can map it down that way, But it's just putting in a number rather than trying to access using I don't know, using a different Python script or something like that. Within
Or you'd maybe have to put a shield on top of it just to get stuff with the Pi.
You would actually. I did work with. I built like a pedal with a Raspberry Pi before, and I had like a Wilson audio card on top of it, but that stole all my GPIO pins. So then I had to use an Arduino as well. So you kind of have this mess of microcontrollers and stuff like that. That's like, this is just, as you can see, it's just like, it's just tidy, like.
Yeah,
you know
it
what I mean?
is. Yeah.
So that's the Syria.
Yeah, that's just like an addendum to that answer is that Intel is just down the road, and they actually developed the first version of Galileo down there, and they were interested in doing things, but no one did that. Like, they had this 30 book, they gave us 30 of these things.
Okay.
No one had done anything with that, so I thought, well, let's see
cool.
what we can do.
Yeah.
That seemed to work.
Yeah.
Very well. I mean, it's not the cheapest solution for that kind of thing, but for us it was.
But because you can directly input or you directly interface with the GPIOs, it means you've got less other stuff has to go in the box.
Yeah.
You know, so that kind of makes it a little bit tidier.
Yeah, totally. There's very little, like, in circuitry. There's a few resistors and a little bit of perf board, and then after that, it's just everything's gone straight into the pins, like, you know, and it's just so neat and tidy. You could bang one out in, like, I don't know, a couple of hours, like, if you had all the parts together, like, you know.
Cool. Yeah, great.
How much do they cost?
I think they're around €60 in and around that. There's a more powerful version now called the Edison. I think there's a new one coming out, the Cowboy as well. But the Edison's very small. It has no like built-in connectivity, but like there's shields and stuff that you can put onto that. It does make it a tiny little bit bigger, but it's far more powerful than it's more powerful than the Pi B. It's far more powerful than the Galileo, and I've used it quite a bit as well. But yeah, so it's really, because it's so small, that's kind of perfect for embedded stuff, I guess. If you want to have like just something powerful that you can walk away from. This is kind of like a balancing act using the Galileo, especially when you're using when you're sending digital information out. It seems to kind of soak up a lot of processing real estate, you know, that kind of way. So in designing the instrument, it's a little balancing act between what you want to do and what is achievable using that little brain of the Galileo, you know. So. Cool. Sam, thank you.